Hello, everyone. This is Bob Villarreal, and this is the next tour, and this is for parts A through D of the first letter. Now, we're hovering right here above the Plaza de Armas in Cusco, Peru, about 11,200 feet down there. Now, this is one of the again, this is the most interesting city, I think, in the world, in South America for me. Now, this plaza has been here since Inca times. And in fact, most of the buildings around the plaza, the foundations are the old Inca buildings, and so this has a great historical significance to it. Anyway, that's what we're looking at. Okay, let me see here. I'd like to mention something now. When you begin reading A and B and so on, you're introduced to some spectacular paintings, I believe they are, by Louis S. Glanzman. Now, he painted these for books published by National Geographic back in the 70s and early 80s, 3 books. And I'm using them with his kind permission. And I hope you enjoy them. Because like I said, I think they're just fantastic. Well, this first couple of parts here, are sections of this letter, de Merida is trying to set the stage for some of the factors that influence the expedition. Okay, and so, for example, and he's relying on friends of his that happen to be historians of the conquest, and he mentions that he'll be drawing upon correspondence with some of the who wrote about the conquest: Hernando Pizarro, Pedro Pizarro, Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, the great Inca historian, Cristobal de Molina, Cieza de Leon, another great Inca historian, and Francisco de Jerez, just among several. Now, when we come across one of those, I footnote the author and the work and the date, his birth date and date of death. Going on to something else here, Captain Almagro, according to de Merida, didn't have any problems in obtaining men for this expedition. Many wanted to go. They were really excited about finding gold in Chile. But unfortunately, he chose Pedro de Alvarado as the second command, and his men were robbers and stole wherever they went. And their actions were sometimes committed away from Father Suarez and Father Molina, the 2 priests with the expedition. Eventually, Almagro was able to moderate their behavior, and you'll see how he was able to do that later on in the letter. Well, to continue on here, he has a certain fondness for Almagro, and Almagro did for him also. But de Merida really respected this guy. Now, he was close to 65 years of age at the time of the journey. An amazing age back in the Middle Ages. And he was a man full of vigor. I mean, he could fight with a sword better than most of his soldiers. And he could throw a spear just as far. He had lost his left eye in a fight in Panama many years before, and the Black Patchy War gave him an intimidating appearance when one first encountered him. Anyway, despite his age, he was a very active man. And that's not, I'm going to change the view here, that wasn't all that uncommon among these Peruvian conquistadors. There were several in their 50s and 60s, and even one 70 years old. The guy was like 6'7", and still able to, get on a horse readily and dismount. I mean, some amazing guys, Well, Almagro appointed de Merida as the officer in charge of the Indian guides, and there were 2 of them. These guides were supplied by the Inca administration in Cusco, and these guys came from present-day southern Argentina, and they knew the way across the Andes to get to Copiapó, Copiapó, today's Copiapó, Chile. And from there, of course, the expedition would go south into Chile looking for gold. Now, He was very fond. Demerida was very fond of these two Indian guides, and he named them according to their personalities or their their dispositions. One was called Felice because he was a perpetually happy fellow. Nothing ever seemed to get him down. Simpatico, or Simple for short, had a gentle nature and a pleasant demeanor, and both were able to endure great hardship without complaint, which was a necessary factor on this expedition. There was another trusted Indian with the expedition. His name was the interpreter, Aste Huaraca, a man of great intelligence, and Demerida really marveled at this guy because he had a very quick and keen mind. He was able to learn a great deal of Spanish in just a couple of months. And that's what made his interpreter job so important. Well, I'm going to vary the view here again. I don't want you to get too set in one place. Yes. Now, the expedition left Cusco for Chile in the middle of winter, July 3rd, 1535. That's part of the historical record. We know that. That's a fact. This is also a fact. 500 in Spanish horsemen and foot soldiers, 12,000 Indians, 50 horses, and more than 3,000 llamas. This large number of natives and llamas was provided by Manco Inca, the new ruler placed in power by Francisco Pizarro. The puppet Inca Manco commanded his brother by the name of Pao Yu and the high priest Villac Umu to accompany the Spanish. This Pao Yu was very important to the expedition. One of the things he did is sent messengers to the villages on the route as they were approached, encouraging their friendship and cooperation, and ensuring that food might be ready when the expedition arrived. He was also seen as the stand-in for the Inca himself. And so he got a great deal of respect, as you'll find out when you read, a great deal of respect along the way, and that helped immensely. Yeah, and so, like I said, one of the things that he did was to make sure that ensuring food might be ready when the expedition arrived. So he was able to contact villages in advance of the expedition getting there so that they would have food from the Inca warehouses that were nearby. Now, Pao Yu and Almagro grew to be friends on the expedition, and in fact, when they returned to Cusco in 1537, Manco Inca had revolted, and Pizarro and Almagro appointed Pao Yu to replace Manco as the head Inca in Cusco. And he lived several more years. He was able to outlast Pizarro, Almagro, and several other of these initial conquistadors, and he lived about another 10 years after that. Something that's interesting, Demerida notes the length of a day's travel. It was usually about 7 to 9 miles. And they measured progress with a contrivance said to be used by the Romans, and Demerida briefly describes it. It's probably called a hodometer, and I was able to locate a picture of one. It's in the photo gallery on the website. Now, the rate was determined solely by the llamas. I mean, a horse in a day could travel 3 times that, okay? But the llama is a very pesky animal. It's much like a donkey in the sense that when they want to stop, that's it. You're not going to be able to do anything with them. You can kick them, you can beat them, you can just about it. They will not move. And so it's like 7 to 9 miles, and then they stop cold. Now, I actually witnessed this. There was a climb on mountains outside of La Paz, and it was Condoriri, Pequeño Alpamayo, and another peak. And in order to get to base camp, there weren't any roads, and so we had to hire some llama arrieros. And they had these llamas in this very large pen, and we drove up and offloaded all our gear, and these arrieros, one was a woman, and they had to wrestle, they wrestle the llamas to ground, okay, and then they're able to tie on our packs and our food stuff and that kind of stuff. Then they let them up. And you got to watch the llama. Okay, because when they get mad and you're nearby, they'll spit right in your face. Not very pleasant. So anyway, but despite the difficulty with the llama sometimes, the Indians and then the Spanish found them useful in many, many ways. Its wool provided warm blankets and clothing, coverings for doorways and woolen grain sacks, and had a myriad of other uses. Its meat is delicious, okay, and still is today. You can get wonderful llama steaks. I had one time in Cusco. And it was eaten roasted or used to flavor soups. Cut into strips and allowed to dry, it provides an immediate source of food for the traveler. Known as charqui, what we call jerky, it's still prepared today. Finally, its manure was highly prized as fuel for fire. So during the journey, for example, Indians followed behind the llama herds collecting their dung. Well, that's enough for now. Try to keep it as short as possible so you don't get bored. Now, in the coming tours, we're going to be traveling in Google Earth over the entire route. So there'll be much more to see. Okay? Thank you very much for joining